We know about the battles of Coral Sea, you know, everybody knows. One of the most famous battles, the Battle of Pearl Harbor, everybody knows. Okinawa, we know the nuclear bombardment of Japan, 2 bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Not very many people know about the Battle of Savo Island, 1942. It is a very important battle. One of the big ones that changed the outcome of the war. It changed the way US and Japanese forces looked upon the situation. So today we are going to focus on the Battle of Savo Island. If you haven't heard about it, it's about your country's history. So simmer down, my friends, and let's learn about some American war history. But before that, we actually have Patreons. Yes, I will read the names of tier 10 and above Patreons. We have some $5 Patreons, $1 Patreons, but I'm sorry, I cannot read all the names because there are many of them. So I will only focus on 10 and more. If you want your name to be read out loud, become a 10 or more tier Patreon. We have Christina Beetle. It's one of those bugs, right? Oh, Beetle. Thank you, Mr. Beetle. Mrs. Christina is a Mrs. Thank you. We have Darren Lanigan. Darren. I'm butchering your names on purpose so you understand I am Estonian. I will put some Estonian pronunciation on top of that, like crumbling some salt on top of your name. Darren. Thank you. Finally, we have Max Dennis. Appreciate it. Alright, my friends. Go and grab your Estonian YouTuber cup and let's learn some history.
It's the late afternoon of August 7th, 1942, and steaming out of the major Japanese base at Rabaul is a powerful Japanese cruiser force. Upon receiving the first report of an American landing on Guadalcanal, Admiral Mikawa, commander of the Japanese 8th Fleet, decides to launch an immediate night attack. Mikawa's hastily assembled force of mainly older warships include 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruiser and 1 destroyer, and is led by Mikawa's flagship, the heavy cruiser Chokai. Mikawa draws confidence from his crew's excellent training and equipment for naval night fighting. They pass right over the American submarine S-38, and minutes later S-38 reports 2 destroyers and 3 heavy cruisers have just powered through the water above her. However, it would not be until...
That is really bad. Immediately, we are going to strike back immediately. Boom, the Japanese power. They don't think about the submarines, right? And they don't even identify the submarine, probably. Their radar systems were not that advanced, I think, back then. Poor Japanese. That's the surprise moment out of the window. In the beginning of the video already, the surprise goes out of the window.
Early the next morning, that Rear Admiral Kelly Turner, in command of the naval forces off Guadalcanal, receives S-38's report. As Mikawa's warships steam out of Rabaul, the first American offensive of the Pacific War is underway. Marines are ashore on Guadalcanal and are slowly moving inland against little opposition, whilst on Tulagi and Gavutu Tanambogo, the Marines meet much fiercer Japanese opposition, and nearly all of the defenders are eventually killed. For months, Commander-in-Chief...
Yeah, Japanese are not big surrenderers. Nearly all of the defenders are eventually killed, means that they don't really surrender. They will fight and they will die for their emperor, but that means it's really difficult to beat them. Yes, the Marines were better in battle, they had better equipment and better training, but if you're fighting against an enemy that wants to die for his emperor, it wants to die in battle, it is scary, because you cannot frighten the enemy with your numbers and your better equipment. They want to die, so it is a really difficult fight, Japanese, on land. That's why you need the nuclear thing that happens later on in the war.
Chief US Fleet, Admiral Ernest J. Young, had wanted to take the offensive in the southern Pacific. With the momentous American victory at Midway essentially eliminating the threat posed by the Imperial Japanese Navy in the Central Pacific, Admiral Wright could focus his still limited forces in the South Pacific. Thus, when American radio intelligence indicated the Japanese were building an airfield on Guadalcanal, threatening Allied supply lines to Australia, the US 1st Marine Division was hastily assembled with the task of seizing strategic islands in the Southern Solomons. Despite the now received report of Japanese vessels leaving Rabaul, Turner's command is unconcerned, believing any Japanese force would be detected by Allied reconnaissance aircraft before reaching Guadalcanal.
Which is true.
With sunrise on August 8th,
They weren't detected by the reconnaissance aircraft, but just the submarine. Doesn't really matter which one, they were detected. No surprise moment.
Mikawa is anxious to know where the American carriers are, and just how strong the American naval forces are off the island. Therefore, he decides to conduct his own reconnaissance of the area. 3 cruiser float planes are ordered to search north of the Solomons, with heavy cruiser Alba's float plane ordered to reconnoitre the American naval forces off Guadalcanal.
Float planes, I'm sorry I paused this much. I gotta understand this correctly. These are cruisers and destroyers, and they have planes on top, but they are put in water to lift themselves up. These ships do not have flight decks, right? These planes are water planes. Do I understand this correctly? Open this up to me in the comments, please.
At 10:25 AM, his force is spotted by a Royal Australian Air Force Hudson.
Here we go!
And Mikawa orders his warships to turn 90 degrees, hoping to leave it confused as to their heading. The Hudson is under orders to follow any Japanese force until additional Allied aircraft can continue the pursuit. But the pilot only stays in the area for 16 minutes before leaving. At 11 AM, another Australian Hudson sights Mikawa's force, but Chokai soon forces it away with her main guns. As they wait nervously for an anticipated air attack.
Main guns, they're huge! You cannot frighten an airplane away with your main guns. You cannot hit an airplane with the main guns. The shells are this wide. The length are taller than me. I mean, yeah, you have anti-aircraft guns, which are machine guns, basically. Many machine guns put together, you know, 4 of them, basically. That's an anti-aircraft gun, but main guns are meant for ships. Cannot frighten aircraft with them, cannot take down aircraft with them, unless you're godly accurate. What do I know, man? I'm an infantryman.
Alba's float plane returns and reports sighting large numbers of transports, destroyers, cruisers, and various other warships off Guadalcanal. With still no word on the location of the American carriers, Mikawa pushes on, determined to crush the American naval forces. What Mikawa does not know is that ineffective Allied air reconnaissance is allowing his force to pass through the slot, as the waters down the Solomons would become known, essentially undetected. Poor weather has grounded several reconnaissance flights, and those that get airborne fly too early to detect Mikawa's force later in the day. Mikawa has timed his approach well after the morning air searches are finished. US Admirals Fletcher and Turner have requested additional afternoon air searches, but these do not materialise, despite the potential danger of S-38's report. Furthermore, upon
Why? We have already seen the Battle of Midway. We know Japanese want to strike back very hard. The S-38 saw enemy ships, and now we're not doing extra reconnaissance. Why? What is happening? They should do it no matter what at this point. I don't know why.
Returning to Milne Bay, both Australian Hudson pilots have now reported sighting an array of warships, with the first mistakenly reporting sighting 2 gunboats or seaplane tenders. Yet it will take until late in the evening for both aircraft's reports to reach Turner, and then until almost midnight before he is informed the air searches had only been partially completed or not completed at all. As such, as August the 9th closes in, Turner concludes the Japanese force sighted earlier, gravely misidentified as only containing 2 seaplane tenders, is of no immediate threat to his naval forces, concluding the Japanese are just going to...
We are hearing, I don't want to sound cocky or anything, but we're hearing the same things that happened in Midway and in Coral Sea. Misidentification. Wrong reconnaissance. Misidentification. There are lesser ships than there actually are. Americans don't take the threat as dangerous as it really is. This can cost you a lot. At this point, before a battle happens, reconnaissance is everything. It seems to me it's the most important thing ever. The information if there are only 2 sea tenders or 2 gunboats or 5 destroyers and 2 cruisers, that's a huge difference. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen in this battle, but I think this plays a role here. It already has. They can slip through unidentified.
To establish a seaplane base nearby and launch torpedo attacks the following day. But over on Mikawa's warships, their crews ready themselves for battle. With the Japanese force closing in, Turner has made the grave mistake of determining what the Japanese intend to do and not acting against what the Japanese, with their excellent night fighting doctrine, might be capable of doing. Thus, Turner's failure to warn his naval forces that a night attack could occur and to enhance their alert status accordingly, is about to lead to disaster.
Oh shit!
Awaiting Mikawa's force off Guadalcanal are several separated fleets of Allied warships. The southern group to the southeast of Savo Island, commanded by Rear Admiral Victor Crutchley, Royal Navy, comprises the Australian heavy cruisers HMAS Australia and Canberra,
yeah, you go,
American heavy
Aussies,
cruiser
you
USS
go.
Chicago, and destroyers USS Bagley and Patterson. However, earlier in the evening, Rear Admiral Crutchley leaves with Australia to meet with Admiral Turner, leaving command of the southern group to Captain Howard Bode on the Chicago. To the northeast of Savo Island is the northern group, commanded by Captain Frederick Reefcall, comprising the heavy cruisers USS Vincennes, Quincy and Astoria, and destroyers Helm and Wilson. Furthermore, patrolling either side of Savo Island with their radar are the destroyers Blue and Ralph Talbot, but their courses are uncoordinated and at times could be almost 20 miles apart, leaving the way wide open for an enemy force to pass through unseen. As the Allied...
Why does these things happen? If you put 2 patrols to patrol a huge area, why don't you coordinate? I mean, for me it seems like a very stupid mistake. You know, if the 2 patrols are going at the same time, at the same place, they cannot cover in the other area, they cannot guard the other area. Why do this? Why do these things happen? If everything is so thought through, it's the military, everything is so expensive, we cannot lose the surprise of momentum in it. By gods, we cannot lose it. And then this. Japanese can just slip through, even if the Americans have radar, because the radar back then was in its infants and it couldn't really detect very far. So it is totally possible for Japanese to slip through this. Both of those radars are just on the other side of this canal.
Allied warships patrol off Guadalcanal. Mikawa's undetected force presses forward, and at 11:12 p.m. launches 4 cruiser float planes to report the location of Allied warships and to be ready to illuminate the dark waters off Savo Island. These float planes are seen and recognised as cruiser float planes by the crews aboard the Allied warships, but Allied commanders are not alerted to the sightings.
Why? It's the second time when Allied commanders are not alerted to the sightings. Why? It is very important to alert them. It's the main thing you gotta do. Hey, I was infantry communication. Somebody is at the night patrol. They see something. First thing they tell their squad leader, who is gonna call the platoon leader, who is gonna call me. I'm gonna tell the company leader, who's gonna tell me to tell something up to the brigade. That's how it goes. So for this, I was just in infantry. This is navy. This is big ships and planes and everything. This link of communication should definitely happen. Definitely they should alert the Allied commanders. This is what I was taught, and I'm just an infantry guy.
At midnight, Mikawa orders his warships increase speed to 26 knots, and for his crews to come to battle stations.
Ooh,
the
battle
force
stations,
is led
here we
by
go.
Mikawa's own flagship, the heavy cruiser Chokai, followed by the heavy cruisers Alba, Keiko, Kinugasa, and Furitaka. Then the light cruisers Tenru, Yubari, and the destroyer Unagi.
Cool names.
At 12:50 a.m, lookouts on Chokai sight the picket destroyer Blue to the southwest of Savo Island. With their guns trained on Blue, Mikawa reduces the speed of his warships to lower their wakes and pushes north to enter via the northern passage. However, as he does, lookouts on Chokai report sighting another destroyer in that direction, and so Mikawa orders his fleet to enter via the south of Savo Island. At 1:34 a.m, Chokai sights the destroyer Jarvis on her port side.
Wait, Blue and both of those ships with radars, you know, US ships, didn't detect them. You're shitting me right now. Lookouts on Japanese ships detected them, and they didn't detect the Japanese, 7 ships? How is this possible? And now also the Japanese are the first to see USS Jarvis. What's up? What's going on?
Leaving the waters off Guadalcanal having received damage from an air attack the day before. Minutes later, Chokai lookouts report sighting 3 cruisers just 6 miles away. This is the southern group, and as Mikawa's warships turn to starboard, at 1:38 a.m, the Battle of Savo Island begins.
Okay, here we go.
Chokai launches 4 torpedoes at HMAS Canberra, followed shortly by her main guns. 3 Japanese heavy cruisers unleash a relentless torrent of lead into Canberra, which is now being illuminated by flares from the Japanese float planes launched earlier. Canberra is hit with 24 shells in just a few minutes, leaving her captain for dead, cutting her power and causing her to list heavily to starboard as Japanese shells penetrate her below the waterline.
She's gone. She's gone.
Despite this, Canberra manages to avoid all 11 torpedoes launched at her.
Whoa.
The Japanese warships begin to maul the rest of the southern group. Mikawa's force divides into two, with Chokai, Alba, Keiko and Kinugasa heading east, and Yubari, Tenru and Furitaka heading north.
It's bleak for the Americans
has
right
broken
now.
off to exchange fire with the Jarvis. Desperately confused to see the Australian heavy cruiser coming under fire and manoeuvring violently, at 1:47 am a torpedo from Keiko strikes the Chicago on her starboard side. Another strikes the cruiser towards the stern, but does not explode. Seconds later, a shell strikes the Chicago's main mast, spraying shrapnel over the ship, wounding and killing some of her crew. In return, Chicago struggles to bring her main guns to bear against the Japanese warships, but her secondary 5-inch guns hit Tenru, killing 23 on the light cruiser.
Ooh.
As the Japanese warships sweep to the north, Chicago continues west, searching vainly to her port side with 2 searchlights, and eventually leaving the battle. Astonishingly,
Why searching left if the shots are coming from the right and the torpedoes are coming from the right? Why left? What's going on here? You're getting shot from this side. You search to this side. It's the fog of war, I guess. Battle confusion.
Captain Bode completely fails to report the action that has just taken place, and leaves his 2 destroyers
Completely fail. Oh my god, me as a communications guy, I get triggered for this. Completely fails to report this. The commanders, the communications chain above from those guys, they don't know what's happening. They cannot send reinforcements. They cannot surround the Japanese with reinforcements. Whatever they want to do. They don't know the situation is going on. Sorry for getting triggered. I apologize.
without orders. The Patterson trades fire with 3 of the Japanese warships, but is ultimately forced to turn away, having herself been damaged by Japanese shells. Meanwhile, Bagley launches torpedoes against Furitaka and Kinugasa, but all miss. Bagley begins to move west, south of Savo Island. It has taken Mikawa's force just minutes to cripple the southern group. Yet in spite of the devastating attack, not one of the warships from the southern group report what has just taken place.
Why? What? It's the most important thing to do. We were taught immediately battle goes on. You know, the infantry, the squads, they exchange fire. What I do is whatever the code is. Code red, Foxtrot, Foxtrot, Foxtrot. That's the first thing you say. So the brigade or the company or the battalion, they know that, for example, Group Alpha or first platoon is in contact with the enemy. That's the first thing you do. You let them know. Then you shoot back. Then you make up a battle plan. Attack from the side, surround, or pull back. First thing you let know, you have a contact with the enemy. And then you let them know where do you have it, how big is the enemy, what is the situation, wounded, ammunition, how much do you have, everything like that. That's what you do. You have special people in the army to do that, communications guys, whose only job is actually to let people know up above what is going on and to let people know downstairs how to act. That was me.
Now in 2 columns, Mikawa's warships continue north. Trokai's lookouts sight the USS Vincennes from the northern group at 1:38 am, from the incredible range of 9 miles. Trokai begins the attack on the northern group by launching 4 torpedoes at Vincennes. Just like the southern group, the northern group is taken by surprise when the 3 American heavy cruisers are smothered by large searchlights on the Japanese warships. Now with their targets clearly illuminated, the Japanese sailors can see the state of confusion aboard the American warships. At this moment, they open fire. Chokai, Alba and Keiko quickly find the range on the Quincy, striking her numerous times, hitting her bridge and causing the fuel on her floatplanes to engulf the upper deck with fire.
No.
Quincy's main guns return fire several times, with 2 8-inch shells hitting Chokai's chart room, killing 36 and almost Mikawa himself.
Whoa!
Torpedoes are in the water from Tenru and Alba, and in the darkness they strike the heavy cruiser. Quincy has been hit by Japanese gunfire over 50 times, and is quickly rendered completely out of action. Seeing that Quincy is under withering fire, Keiko alters her aim to target Vincennes, which is now responding against Kinugasa. Keiko quickly begins to range Vincennes, striking her numerous times amidships, and like on Quincy, Vincennes float planes cause intense fires on her upper deck. Coming under increasingly accurate fire, Vincennes' captain tries to maneuver his warship away, but a torpedo from Chokai strikes the heavy cruiser. Shortly after, Vincennes is hit by another torpedo from Yubari. Her captain knows her situation is hopeless, and the order is given to abandon ship.
Oh, hell.
As Chokai switches her fire to Astoria, Astoria's gunnery officer orders her 8-inch main guns to begin firing back at the Japanese. But as her captain comes to the bridge, he orders Astoria to hold fire, fearing she is firing on friendly vessels.
Oh, no.
Very soon it becomes clear that she is not, and Astoria continues firing back. The Japanese fire is relentless, and soon shells from Chokai put 2 of Astoria's 3 main guns out of action. More of the Japanese warships switch their fire to Astoria, and the heavy cruiser is smothered with shells, leaving her a flaming wreck. One of her final acts would be to strike Chokai's leading main battery turret, killing and wounding many of the gun crew. With all 3 of the American heavy cruisers either in the process of sinking or being consumed by fires, the Japanese warships begin to withdraw to the north of Savo Island. They sight the picket destroyer.
This is one of the most effective battles on water I have seen. Hell! I know it's one of the last ones the Japanese won, actually. The rest of them Americans won, but they amaze me. I cannot... Hey, I'm on your side, I'm on America's side, of course, but this amazes me. It is after Midway, isn't it? They have lost their aircraft carriers. This is what they do.
Talbot, striking at once. Yubari then illuminates the destroyer with her searchlight, and 5 more hits are scored. Salvation comes for the Ralph Talbot as she is covered by rain. At 2:16 AM, Mikawa discusses the situation with his staff. Whilst this force still has plenty of ammunition left, and has taken only very limited damage, his warships are now well out of formation. As such, Mikawa's command believe it will take 2 hours for his warships to reform their formation and attack the transports off Guadalcanal and Tulagi. This would only leave them with another hour of darkness, and the break of dawn would surely see them swarmed with incoming American carrier aircraft.
Yeah, they cannot act during the day because Americans have more aircraft carriers and plenty of aircraft, including Australia's aircraft. They gotta do it during the night, and this has been very effective. I was Japan right now, I would call it quits. You don't want to lose this force. You have lost so many already. I would call it quits, because it's going light outside and you cannot fight during the day because you don't have aircraft carriers anymore.
Now that their presence is very much known. Memory of the fate of the Japanese Mogami-class heavy cruisers Mikuma and Mogami, sunk and severely damaged respectively at the Battle of Midway, makes Mikawa fearful of what American carrier aircraft could do to his force if he does not immediately leave the area.
Yeah.
Moreover, Mikawa is content that his force has achieved an overwhelming naval victory, and he has been assured that the Imperial Japanese Army will easily sweep the Americans from Guadalcanal. Thus, at 2:20 AM, Mikawa gives the order for his force to withdraw. Had he chosen to reform his force and attack the 18 American transports off Guadalcanal and Tulagi, he could have transformed his crushing tactical victory into an overwhelming strategic victory, and without their supplies and the transports to deliver them, it is unlikely the Marines on Guadalcanal could have held the island, and the first American offensive of the Pacific War would have failed. As Mikawa's force leaves the area, the American sailors left aboard the 3 heavy cruisers of the Northern Group fight to stay alive. Abandoned ship is ordered on Quincy and Vincennes, and they both sink during the night.
Okay.
To the south, with fire spreading throughout the ship, at 5:15 the order to abandon HMAS Canberra is given. At 8 AM she sinks after being scuttled by American destroyers. Astoria sinks the following day.
They all sink.
With Astoria's sinking, Allied losses come to 4 heavy cruisers sunk, 1 damaged, as well as 2 destroyers damaged. 1,077 Allied sailors are lost in the battle, almost as many as the 1,207 Marines that would die in the Guadalcanal campaign overall. The Japanese only lose 34 sailors. At the Battle of Savo Island, Mikawa achieves an outstanding yet incomplete victory. He showed extraordinary aggression in attacking the stronger American and Australian naval force off Guadalcanal, but whilst he did win an overwhelming victory, had he destroyed the American transports, the result would have been catastrophic for the Allies. The Americans could find some solace in the fact that although they had suffered the worst defeat in the history of the US Navy, their transports and supplies had largely survived, and as time would reveal, the battle for Guadalcanal was far from over, and there would be many more savage battles to come.
Oh, I like this. I love this a lot. We have the hindsight. We know everything about both sides. I like this so much, my friends. And if you do also, you can put in the comments what battles should I focus on in the future on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a Patreon. Thank you for supporting this channel. It means a lot to me. If you like my videos, then you can go and get the Estonian YouTuber Cup or the Estonian Soldier hat. And as always, my friends, until my next video, stay cool and bye bye.